Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Doug the Retirement Guy with the monthly ETFs. Improve your retirement income. 4 monthly income ETFs I'd consider for a retirement portfolio. This comes from one of our YouTube viewers and subscribers. They sent us an email and we contacted them. We've talked a little bit. They had a little disagreement of how to handle their upcoming retirement, how to plan what they were working on. And so we just talked about it, and I came up with 4 monthly incomes that they didn't even know about. And I just helped them understand what their dilemma is. We'll cover all that today, but before we do, if you're not a YouTube subscriber to our channel, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. You don't want to miss a single one of our videos. Let's get into today's video. Notice to all viewers, past performance does not guarantee future results. This information in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. If you need financial help, always contact a financial advisor or professional before making those decisions. So our couple has an issue. Their investments are $950,000. The cost of living they have is about $75,000. These are two very big numbers I normally always have to know. But Bob wants to invest into covered call ETFs. He's read up about them. He's heard about them. He's seen them that they pay weekly. They've done a lot of different research. And then Helen jumped in and says she's read about this whole thing called NAV erosion. And is scary of losing her total investment to this possible covered call strategy. So I explained to him that NAV erosion is a problem, and I wanted to explain to her exactly what NAV erosion is and how it occurs. So this occurs when a fund distributes more income than the genuine earnings through dividends, interest, and capital gains. The result in the funds returning a portion of the investor's principal as income. So ultimately, it shrinks the investor's nest egg over time, making distributions increasingly unsustainable. Instead of, and this is the exact words I put it, instead of a golden goose laying a golden egg, a healthy fund generates true income. Some funds are slowly cooking the goose itself, meaning that the depleting of the underlying capital to maintain high distributions. So visualizing this, and I put this on the screen to them, is I want you guys to understand this. As distributions continue either going up or maintain where they're at, and the value of the income, the true growth of a fund slowly continues to drop. In 5 years, NAV erosion could eliminate an entire program. So a lot of people will call it, and she actually brought this up, NAV erosion creates a Ponzi-like scheme where increasing distributions eventually become impossible, leaving investors with a depleted principal and unsustainable income. And this is very true. But what you have to do is your research. And I told them, you have to do your own research. You can't watch a YouTube video. You can't listen to what I say. You really have to do your own research to find out what's behind the scene, what do the companies do, what's the ETF do, what are they doing for the cover call strategies. So NAV erosion is real, but if you use a select approach, as I said, do your research. Cover calls can help or even cover all of your cost of living. So I'm going to share with you 4 different ETFs that I have in my portfolio. I've done a ton of research on that I feel should really be in each and every person's retirement program based on my portfolio. This is totally different from everyone else's. You will have your own rules and regulations. You have your own risks. But let me cover these 4 that I think should be out there. So the first fund I brought up to them was JEPI, the Protector Overview. I call it the Protector ETF. The JEPI, the JP Morgan Equity Premium Income ETF, is designed to provide stability and income through a two-engine aircraft strategy, making it ideal for people who are afraid and have a very, very low tolerance to risk. Focus on the stability and the downside protection, the potential monthly income, and the capital preserved through covered call strategies. I always said this is ideal for retirees in their 60s through their 70s seeking stable and reliable income potential across the board. The key metrics, as I shared with them, in $40 billion is under assets. The dividend yield is about 8.39%. This launched in May 20th of 2020 and has an expense ratio of only 0.35%, so extremely low expense structure. When we look at the year-to-date return, about a 5.95%, and a 5-year total return of 10.38%. You add that to what you're getting in your dividends, you have a strong package for your growth and income. So their strategy, what they use, where I call it that two-engine strategy. The first engine is 80 to 85 large cap S&P 500 stocks. It focuses on high quality companies with lower volatility exposure. The second engine is 15% equity linked notes, ELNs, and exposure to the S&P 500 call options. So there's no direct cover calls on the stocks. What they're doing is the equity linked notes is what they're doing in the covered stocks. The performance metrics, as you can see, it gives you a dividend yield of 8.39%. A year-to-date return on estimate is about 5.95%, and over the past 5 years is giving you a 10.38%. So this dual approach generates income from both stable dividends and option premiums. So you don't have all your eggs in one basket. You have them split. This is what makes JPI so attractive. The next one is, I always call the sister of it, the JEPQ. Now this is the Balanced Warrior overview. The ticker is JEPQ. It has $31.46 billion in assets. It launched in May 3rd of 2022. It has that same exposure of 0.35 expensive. JEPQ offers a dynamic approach to income generation with a focus on technology leaders. So this one focuses more on a particular segment versus just doing the entire S&P 500. Now, concentrating the portfolio targeted on technology sector leaders creates a balance between income generation and growth potential. Now, the dividend yield is between at 10 to 10.3% annually, and the portfolio focuses on, as you can see here, information technology 54%, 15% communications, 13% consumer, 16% other. So realistically, their top holdings make up 47% of their funds. So they're very right into that technical information side of it. Now, the JEPQ strategy is similar to JEPI, but focuses on the NASDAQ 100 technology leaders. It's more concentrated portfolio of the top 10 holdings account for 47% of the total funds. So yes, they're using a lot of different stocks, but 47%, so just shy of half of them are all done in the top 10 holdings. Now, performance, it's outperformed JEPI because that's the goal of the program. And you can see that 10 to 10.3% dividend yield. Now, these numbers fluctuate all the time. I put it in there as an estimate because you see this video today, you see it tomorrow, the numbers all change. So these are just as current snapshot of the numbers of when making this video. The year-to-date return of 10.13%. The cumulative return of 57.9, and this thing I said launched in May 3rd of 2022. The performance timeline, you can see the thing just has continued to have a solid base growth across the board. Number 3, SPYI. Now this one here is 5.85 billion. So you can see we're not putting a small funds out there. We're putting some big boys out there. We're putting funds that have billions of dollars in for investments. And we're also putting funds that have been out there for a few years, August of 2022. Expense rate's a little bit higher, 0.68%, but they produce a higher distribution rate, a higher year-to-date return. So you can see a 12.15 to 12.16 and a 12.77 total return. So this one does, again, covered call on the S&P 500. So similar to JEPI, this one does the returns on the S&P 500. It covers the S&P 500 almost to a T with 506 to 513 holdings roughly. Now the premium is reinvestment, using premiums to buy out of the money call options. This is the little difference that they do than the JP Morgan one. They're getting premiums to buy out of the money call options, and that's what generates that income. So their strategy and the tax benefits. The unique strategy that they invest in the entire S&P 500 stocks. They write covered call options on those S&P 500 index. And they use a portion of their premiums to purchase long out of the money call options, which increases the premiums that they can collect. It captures more upside potential in risky markets, very similar to what we have today. So it's capturing a lot more upside potential, unlike traditional covered call ETFs that cap their upsides. And this is the number one problem with covered calls, that it caps that upside. And SPYI is able to find ways to capture more of the upside potential in rising markets. The next thing that they use as a tax advantages is Section 1256 of contracts. Index options qualify for that section, which makes it very favorable tax treatment of 60% long-term and 40% short-term rates, applied regardless of the holding period. So it's a big advantage. So you're going to, as you should know or do know, that the 60% long-term, that reduces the capital gains taxes that you would have to pay on your gains for a very low percentage. Plus, it also uses return of capital. Now, this is a double-edged sword. Some people will hear return of capital and they think they're getting their money back. Well, in some funds like ULTY, you are very true on that. But on this fund, SPYI, they use it for a tax deferring purposes. Approximately 99% of the distributions classified as return of capital that defers your taxation until you sell the fund. I have a video out there that explains all of return of capital. I can't get into that because it's another 15-20 minutes just to explain return of capital. But watch that video if you want to know more. But this is another advantage SPYI uses to help cover your tax burden into retirement. Now our final fund is QDVO, the Growth and Income Hybrid. Now I will put my own personal opinion out there and my personal choice in my portfolio. I have this fund. I like this fund. I like everything it does about it. So I got to be upfront and tell everybody that I do own this. QDVO is $375 million in the account in assets under management. This fund launched in August 30th of 2024. It's the newest fund out of the four. It's the youngest one out of the group. I like the expense ratio of 0.55. But look at the numbers. The distribution rate, 9.08%. But the year-to-date return, total return, is 18.56%. The unique strategy that they use is starts off with 25 high-income stocks. These are going to be your Nvidias, your Apples. These are going to be the large tech companies. Now, the cover call writing is only on 30 to 50% of their portfolio. So the worst case scenario is 50% of their portfolio has covered calls written onto it. The other 50% is doing what? Generating additional income. The premium reinvestment using premiums to buy out of the money call options again is used in DVO. So their systematic approach using that 30 to 50% of the portfolio of writing calls, it preserves the upside potential while generating income. It's actively manages call writing based on implied volatility. So they're using it for a strategy. If you're seeing volatility coming around, they're going to use what they have to create income based off of that volatility. It focuses on the out of the money calls with 1 month durations. And they're trying to target at 4 to 6% analyzed option income. So you take 4 to 6. So I'll explain again. This, and you can see the excitement I get from it. They're getting 4 to 6% from option income. That means how are they making 9%? Well, they're picking up another 3% from dividends from the funds that they offer. So there's a combinations. That's why I say this thing uses multiple different approaches to obtain the overall potential income. Now, the tax advantages, very similar to what we just used with SPYI, the Section 1256 contracts. They're using that return of capital as an additional support to it. So very strong in your tax basis. So let's look at the performance comparisons. When we look at this as a complete blend across the board, you will see JEPI is the lowest one at 8.39. Now QDVO comes in at 9.08. So I'm going to put those two about equal with each other. Then you get the JEPQ, which generates at 10%, and a SPYI generating at 12%. Now, of course, these are all estimated numbers. These are a snapshot of when the video was taken. Year-to-date total return comparisons. JPI is down at 6.95, JEPQ 12.85, SPYI 14.61, and QDVO has 18.56. So you're doing both of, you're generating income and growth. And why do you need that in a portfolio? Very simple. You need income to live on. You need income to live on, but you also have to have your funds slowly growing to cover for increased costs, inflation, and stability. So ideal investor profiles, I mean, if you can, this is basically taking it and breaking it down one fund for one category, but I like putting all of this together in one nice sample package. But if you're in your retirement between your 60s and 70s, JEPI is probably one. You want to protect your total wealth. You want to protect your downside protection. You're willing to give up some income for that protection. JEPI is great for you. Professionals are in that 50s to 60s are like on their verge of getting into retirement. And I personally also think JEPQ is one for longer periods as well. But professionals in that 50s to 60s, they want the higher income. They want that tech exposure. They're interested in AI, cloud computing, and so on. Can accept moderate risk growth because there is some risk with all of these, but there's more risk in JEPQ than it is JPI. And I think that's how you look at these across the board. But in SPYI, the total return champion, that thing just has a strong total return coming out of it. And QDVO, I put that is across the board with everybody. It preserves your upside potential while generating income. You got that 4 to 6% in option income potential along with your dividend income. It just gives you a nice value for growth across the board. Plus SPYI, QDVO both have that tax advantage in those covered call strategies to maximize your total return. So I just like all four of these as one nice package. So the recommendations that I gave to them, and I suggest, I suggest and put it out there for you to figure out your own percentages, but you don't need to always, I call, get greedy. So we put 20% into JEPI, 30% into JEPQ, and 30% into SPYI, with 20% being QDVO. This total package, realistically generates a substantial income potential of about 12% and higher. It diversifies across many income strategies, and it's a balanced protection in market upside and some market downside. So this whole thing are all their monthly paying ETFs, and we said it's 10+%. It actually calculated out to be greater than 12%. But this is a nice portfolio across the board to add into someone's mix. So our couple had the issue, the investment of $950,000, the cost of living at $75,000. In this example, with a balanced approach, a 10% potential yield, it could really cover their entire cost of living and never have to touch their principal. Assuming that distributions remain stable, markets cooperate, and before taxes and fees. In reality, yields can change, markets can move, and results will vary. That's why I'm using the 10% versus the bigger number that the computer spit it out of 12 or 13%. But just basically look at that. In this example, they were able to do it on a 10% yield. The conclusion and takeaways. These four funds offer a potential sustainable approach to generating high monthly income, addressing the critical issues of NAV erosion in many high yield funds. Now, each one has a reason for it and has a reason what they do. So we start with JEPI. That gives you the downside protection with an 8% yield, and focusing on high quality and low volatility companies. JEPQ gives you a balanced warrior. It gives you that 10% yield focused on technology leaders with more concentrated portfolio. SPYI and QDVO both concentrate on strong yields, but also utilize that 1256 contracts and tax efficiency. These ETFs achieve sustainable by utilizing covered call options to generate income for option premiums while preserving the underlying asset values. This makes them very valuable tools for income-focused investors seeking distributions without compromising principal, while aiming to preserve that principal over the long term. There are no guarantees, and all these investments can lose money. So remember that. It's always possible of that ability.